There's a moment we all recognize. You do something, maybe it's sharing an idea in a meeting, posting a picture online, or even just choosing what to wear. And then almost instinctively, you look around, you wait. You check faces, likes, reactions. It's not the action itself that matters, but the response, the approval, the validation. Without it, the act feels incomplete. Validation itself isn't wrong. We are social creatures wired to belong, wired to seek connection. The trouble begins when validation shifts from being feedback to becoming fuel. When the only way we know our worth is through the eyes of someone else, we hand over the keys to our confidence. We outsource our self-belief. The irony is, the more we seek it, the less we feel it. A compliment that once gave us joy now barely lasts a moment before we need another. The applause feels good, but it fades too quickly. And so we chase again. Over time, it stops being a celebration and becomes a dependency. Like a drug, the high diminishes and the craving grows. Think of the decisions made not because they were right, but because they would be liked. The career path chosen because it impressed others. The words spoken because they aligned with what people wanted to hear, not what you believed. This quiet sacrifice chips away at authenticity, and when authenticity goes, confidence doesn't stand a chance. Even respect is tied to this cycle. People respect those who stand on their own ground, not those constantly scanning the room to see if they're approved of. When others sense you're desperate for validation, they might indulge you temporarily. But they won't trust you to lead, to take risks, or to hold firm when it matters. Seeking constant validation is like building a house on rented land. Every day the landlord decides whether you get to stay. And when you realize that, you start to feel anxious, unsure, unsteady. You can't settle, you can't rest because the foundation isn't yours. True confidence, on the other hand, is built when you own the ground you stand on. But here's the hidden cost. By depending on validation, you teach yourself not to trust your own judgment. That inner voice, once strong and clear, gets drowned out by the noise of other people's opinions. You stop asking, "What do I believe?" and start asking, "What will they think?" Over time, you forget the sound of your own conviction. And perhaps the saddest part is this: the validation you're chasing is never as powerful as the self-respect you lose along the way. The nods, the likes, the applause, they might fill the silence for a moment, but they cannot replace the steady, unshakable belief that comes from saying, "I know who I am, and that's enough." There's a voice we all carry with us, and it speaks louder than any critic will ever meet. It doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't knock politely. It slips in unnoticed. It whispers when you're about to try something new, when you're standing at the edge of possibility. And instead of cheering you forward, it reminds you of every reason you shouldn't, couldn't, or won't succeed. This voice doesn't shout. It doesn't have to. It's effective because it's familiar. It knows your fears, your past mistakes, your insecurities. It collects every stumble you've ever made and uses them as ammunition. Remember the last time you tried this, it says. Remember how badly you failed. And before you even take a step, you've already convinced yourself not to move. The danger of negative self-talk isn't just in what it says. It's in how easily we believe it. We don't stop to question its authority. We don't ask, "Is this true?" or "Where is the evidence?" Instead, we nod along, giving it the credibility it doesn't deserve. And once believed, it becomes prophecy. If you tell yourself you're not capable, you'll find ways to prove yourself right. Think about the opportunities turned down not because they weren't possible, but because you convinced yourself you weren't ready. The relationships that never began, the projects never started, the ideas never shared, not because of rejection from others, but because of rejection from yourself. In that sense, negative self-talk becomes the most powerful gatekeeper of your life. Confidence isn't about the absence of doubt. It's about what you do with it. And yet, when the inner critic takes the driver's seat, confidence doesn't stand a chance. Every achievement feels smaller, every setback feels permanent. Even success becomes tainted because the voice tells you it was luck, not ability. It steals not just your courage, but your joy. Respect follows a similar path. People naturally respect those who carry themselves with assurance, who speak with conviction. But if you're constantly second-guessing, hesitating, apologizing for your existence, that respect is harder to earn. Others see the cracks in the way you see yourself, and often they mirror back what you project. The most insidious part is how automatic it becomes. You spill coffee and mutter, "I'm so stupid." You forget a detail and think, "I can never get anything right." These may seem small, harmless even. But each phrase is a brick, and over time, you build a wall of self-doubt so high that even your own potential can't climb over it. And once that wall is built, you begin to live within it. Safe maybe, protected in a way, but also trapped. You don't risk, you don't grow, you don't stretch. And the voice inside wins, not because it was right, but because you stopped fighting back. There's a pattern that quietly undermines both confidence and respect. It's the habit of shifting blame. Something goes wrong, and instead of asking, "What was my part in this?" the instinct is to point outward. The boss was unfair. The team wasn't supportive. The timing wasn't right. By handing responsibility away, it feels like the weight is lifted. But in truth, the cost is much heavier. Responsibility is more than just admitting fault. It's the act of owning your choices, your actions, and their outcomes. When you avoid that ownership, you also avoid growth. Every mistake, every challenge, every failure carries within it a lesson. But lessons can only be learned when they're acknowledged. Blame robs you of that chance and keeps you repeating the same cycles. On the surface, blaming others can feel protective. It shields your ego, cushions your pride, and allows you to escape uncomfortable truths. But that comfort is temporary. Over time, it chips away at your confidence because deep down you know you're avoiding the mirror. And confidence can't grow in avoidance, it grows in accountability. Think of the people you admire most. They are rarely the ones who pretend perfection. They are the ones who say, I got it wrong. Here's what I'll do differently next time. That ownership doesn't make them weak, it makes them trustworthy. The willingness to be responsible signals strength, humility, and a commitment to progress. When responsibility is avoided, respect fades quickly. Colleagues hesitate to rely on you if they know you'll shift blame when things get hard. Leaders lose credibility when they only take credit for success but never responsibility for failure. Even in personal relationships, trust erodes when one person refuses to acknowledge their role in conflict. Respect is built on reliability, and reliability requires accountability. Confidence, too, is tied to this practice. When you own your actions, even your mistakes, you send yourself a powerful message. I can handle it. That simple truth builds resilience. Each mistake becomes proof not of inadequacy, but of capability. You can adapt, learn, and move forward. Avoiding responsibility steals that opportunity and leaves you fragile. There's also the subtle impact on identity. If everything is someone else's fault, then your life is always at the mercy of others. You become a passenger rather than the driver. And passengers may complain about the journey, but they don't get to choose the destination. Avoiding responsibility is, in many ways, giving away control of your own life. The paradox is that taking responsibility, while uncomfortable in the moment, is the very thing that creates freedom. It frees you from excuses, frees you from repetition, frees you from being defined by your mistakes. By owning them, you transform them into stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. Comparison begins innocently enough. You see someone else's success, their achievements, their lifestyle, and you measure it against your own. It seems harmless, even motivating at times. But slowly, it shifts from inspiration to judgment. Instead of asking, what can I learn from them? The question becomes, why am I not there yet? And with that, the seed of inadequacy takes root. The danger of comparison lies in its unfairness. You measure your behind the scenes against someone else's highlight reel. You know every detail of your own struggles, but only see the polished version of theirs. It's not a fair fight, yet you keep playing the game. And the more you play, the more you lose, not because you aren't enough, but because the rules were stacked against you from the start. Confidence suffers most in this cycle. No matter how much progress you make, there is always someone ahead, someone doing more, someone looking better, someone achieving faster. By focusing outward, you blind yourself to your own growth. Your wins feel smaller, your efforts seem pointless, and the voice in your head whispers, you'll never catch up. Respect, too, diminishes in this habit. When you're consumed by comparison, it shows. Envy replaces appreciation, resentment replaces connection. Instead of celebrating others, you secretly compete with them. People notice. They feel the insecurity behind your interactions, and it makes trust difficult. Respect is born from authenticity, but comparison erodes authenticity at its core. There's also the trap of identity. Comparison convinces you that the only way to measure worth is against someone else's life. You stop asking, what matters to me? And start asking, how do I measure up? Over time, you lose sight of your own values, your own goals, your own definition of success. It's a quiet form of self-abandonment. The cruel irony is that comparison doesn't stop once you reach the milestone you envied. By then, someone else has already gone further, and the cycle resets. You thought confidence would come when you closed the gap, but instead the finish line moved. And so you run harder, not realizing the race has no end. This habit also blinds you to your uniqueness. The very qualities that set you apart, your perspective, your journey, your struggles, get ignored because they don't look like anyone else's. But what makes you different is often what makes you valuable. By constantly comparing, you trade individuality for imitation, and in doing so, you diminish your own worth. In the end, comparison becomes a thief of joy, of peace, of self-respect. It convinces you that no matter what you achieve, it's never enough. And the more you listen, the less you believe in your own path, the less you trust your own pace, the less you honor your own story. It often starts with good intentions. You say yes because you want to help, you want to impress, you want to be seen as capable. You make commitments that in the moment feel possible. But as time passes, reality sets in. The deadlines slip, the quality falls short, or the promise goes unfulfilled altogether. What began as enthusiasm turns into disappointment, for others and for yourself. On the surface, overpromising seems harmless. After all, the intention was positive. But promises are not measured by intention, they are measured by follow-through. Each time you deliver less than you committed, trust erodes. People stop believing your words. They nod politely when you say, I'll handle it, but deep down, they prepare for the possibility that you won't. Confidence takes a hit as well. Every unkept promise is a silent message to yourself. I can't rely on me. And when you can't trust yourself, how can you expect others to? Confidence is built on a history of small victories, of saying you'll do something and then doing it. Overpromising and underdelivering breaks that chain, leaving you doubting your own capacity. Respect follows the same path. People respect consistency more than charisma, reliability more than ambition. They may admire big words in the moment, but it's actions over time that define reputation. When words and actions don't align, respect fades quickly. And once respect is lost, it's rarely regained through promises. It can only be rebuilt through consistent action. There's also the pressure that comes with overpromising. The more you commit beyond your ability, the heavier the weight you carry. Deadlines loom, expectations mount, and the fear of disappointing others grows. Ironically, the stress of trying to fulfill too much often leads to delivering even less. What was meant to prove your capability instead highlights your limits. Sometimes overpromising comes from a fear of saying no. You worry that refusing will make you seem weak or unhelpful. But in reality, saying yes too easily sends the opposite message. People begin to see you as unreliable, not generous. True respect comes not from agreeing to everything, but from committing only to what you can do well, and then doing it. The damage isn't only external. Each time you fail to deliver, you reinforce an internal narrative of failure. You begin to see yourself as someone who can't keep up, someone who always falls short. That story becomes a filter for every future decision. Instead of approaching challenges with confidence, you hesitate, already expecting to disappoint. Overpromising and underdelivering at its core is a habit of disconnection. The gap between words and actions grows wider until trust, confidence, and respect all fall through it. And once that gap is established, both others and yourself begin to doubt not just what you'll do, but who you are. Failure is one of the most powerful teachers we have, yet it's the one most people avoid at all costs. The fear of failing doesn't just stop you from making mistakes. It stops you from trying at all. You convince yourself that staying still is safer than taking a step that might go wrong. And in that decision, growth is quietly locked away. This fear is rooted in perception. Somewhere along the way, failure became linked to identity. Instead of seeing it as an event, you began to see it as a reflection of who you are. If you fail, then you are a failure. That belief makes every risk feel personal, every setback feel permanent, and every mistake feel unbearable. But in reality, failure is neutral. It doesn't define you. It informs you. It's feedback, not judgment. Every failure points to what didn't work, not to who you are. Yet when fear takes over, logic is drowned out by emotion. You freeze, you hesitate, and you tell yourself stories about how disastrous the outcome will be if you take the leap. The cost of this inaction is invisible at first. No one sees the opportunities you never pursued, the skills you never developed, the relationships you never started. But over time, the weight of what could have been grows heavier. The regret of never trying often outweighs the pain of failing, but by the time you realize it, the chance has passed. Confidence erodes in this cycle. Confidence is built by experience, by doing, by trying, by learning. When you avoid action for fear of failure, you rob yourself of those experiences. You deny yourself the evidence that you are capable of handling challenges. Without that evidence, confidence can't grow. Instead, doubt expands to fill the space left by inaction. Respect also falters here. People respect those who step into uncertainty, who take risks, who are willing to stumble in pursuit of something greater. When you're ruled by fear, others sense it. They see the hesitation, the avoidance, the unwillingness to stretch. And respect rarely flows toward those who choose safety over courage every time. There's also the illusion of control that fear creates. By not acting, you feel like you've avoided the risk of failure. But the truth is, you've simply traded one risk for another. You avoided the chance of falling short, but you guaranteed the loss of growth. Inaction is not safety, it's stagnation dressed in disguise. At its core, fear of failure is not about failure itself. It's about what you believe failure says about you. And until that belief is challenged, the cycle continues. You remain on the sidelines, watching life move forward, all while convincing yourself that standing still is the wiser choice. Momentum feels powerful in the beginning. A new goal, a new idea, a new plan, it sparks energy, excitement, and determination. You dive in headfirst, convinced that this time will be different. For a while it is. The effort is strong, the results are encouraging, and confidence grows. But then the energy fades, the enthusiasm weakens, and what started as a sprint slows to a crawl before stopping altogether. Consistency is the bridge between intention and achievement. Without it, even the best ideas collapse. One workout doesn't make you healthy. One act of kindness doesn't build trust. One good presentation doesn't establish expertise. Strength, credibility, and respect are not built in bursts, they are built in patterns. When the pattern breaks, so does the progress. The problem with inconsistency is that it doesn't just stall growth, it reverses it. Each time you quit halfway, you reinforce a belief that you can't follow through. That belief chips away at your confidence, leaving you hesitant the next time you set a goal. It's not the lack of ability that stops you. It's the history of broken promises to yourself. Others notice too. People respect reliability. They trust those who show up not once, but repeatedly. Over time, when you're inconsistent, your credibility suffers. Promises lose their weight, commitments lose their meaning, and people begin to see you as unpredictable. Respect isn't lost in one moment. It's lost in the pattern of many unfinished ones. Inconsistency also feeds frustration. You see glimpses of what's possible when you give effort, but you never stay long enough to realize the full potential. It's like planting seeds and walking away before they grow. The soil wasn't the problem, the water wasn't the problem. It was simply that you stopped too soon. That cycle leaves you questioning your ability, when in truth it was your persistence that failed, not your potential. There's an emotional cost as well. Each restart carries with it a heavier burden. You don't just begin again. You begin with the memory of having stopped before. That memory whispers doubts, makes excuses easier, and lowers your belief in lasting change. Inconsistency builds a reputation not just with others, but with yourself. And once you start to see yourself as someone who doesn't finish, that identity shapes every new attempt. What consistency requires is rarely extraordinary effort. It requires ordinary effort repeated. The leaders, the athletes, the creators who inspire us are rarely those who had one burst of brilliance. They are the ones who kept showing up day after day, long after the initial excitement wore off. Consistency is not glamorous, but it is what transforms potential into reality. The tragedy of inconsistency is not the absence of talent, but the absence of persistence. It's not that the goal was unreachable, it's that the effort was unsustained. And when effort fades, confidence weakens, respect dwindles, and credibility dissolves, leaving behind only the echo of what could have been. Respect is often spoken about as something we earn, but rarely do we acknowledge that it begins with what we give. The way you treat others reflects not only on them, but on you. When disrespect becomes a habit, through dismissive words, careless actions, or lack of empathy, it erodes both your confidence and the respect you receive in return. Disrespect doesn't always show up in loud, obvious ways. Sometimes it's subtle, the interrupted conversation, the promise forgotten, the failure to listen when someone is speaking. These small acts may seem insignificant in the moment, but they accumulate, sending the message that others don't matter as much as you do. And people remember how you make them feel more than anything else. Confidence thrives when it is rooted in humility, not arrogance. When you disrespect others, you reveal insecurity rather than strength. It suggests that in order to feel important, you need to diminish someone else. True confidence requires no such comparison. It stands on its own, built on self, respect that extends outward as respect for others. In relationships, professional or personal, respect is the currency of trust. Once disrespect enters, trust begins to decay. People may still interact with you, but the bond weakens. They become cautious, less open, less willing to collaborate. Over time, the walls they build around themselves are not just protection from you, they are a reflection of how they no longer see you as dependable. Disrespect also limits growth. Every person you encounter holds knowledge, perspectives, or experiences that could expand your own. But when you dismiss others, you close the door to learning. You miss out on insights, advice, and opportunities that could have strengthened your journey. In trying to stand taller, you cut off the very support that could lift you higher. The impact is internal as well. When you consistently disregard others, a part of you knows it. It creates tension, guilt, or denial. And that inner conflict eats away at confidence. Because confidence is not just about how others see you. It's about how you see yourself. If your actions don't align with the kind of person you want to be, confidence can't take root. People naturally respect those who show respect. It doesn't mean agreeing with everyone, but it does mean valuing them as human beings with worth. When you belittle, ignore, or mistreat others, you weaken your own credibility. Even if you succeed outwardly, that success will be shadowed by the absence of genuine respect from those around you. At its heart, disrespecting others is a habit that reflects back on your character more than theirs. It signals to the world how secure or insecure you are in yourself. And while it may gain compliance or fear in the short term, it will never gain the lasting confidence and respect that only mutual dignity can build.